Peptides may be the most talked about molecules in modern health, from weight loss drugs and injury healing, Wolverine stacks and aging biohacks. But between influencer hype and people ordering powders online, the real science
Yes.
is getting lost. Today, we're joined by the peptide expert, Regan Archibald, to separate myth from medicine and show us how these tiny signaling molecules may shape the future of longevity if we use them wisely. Welcome to the show, Reagan, again.
Man, so good to be back.
Welcome, welcome.
I'm so excited for this show. I'm so excited to see you. This is great.
Hey, Reagan, let me ask you. I was asking Terry, just for the audience, man, what makes you an expert? Give us a little history of why.
Man, well, I've heard the definition from Peter Diamandis that expert is somebody who has all the answers, and that is not me. So, it should be it's an obsession, and when you learn something and it feels like you've already learned it before, it's like intuitive.
Very
That's
good.
how peptides were with me about a decade ago when I jumped into them. They came so naturally, and understanding the pathways, the mechanics of them, understanding the energetic expression, because all peptides are is these little amino acids that are folded in very particular sequence. And if they've got the right bonding and if they've got the right end caps, you're going to get this crazy physiological response with no toxic burden. And so I think the only thing that makes me an expert is I probably spent more weekends studying peptides and experimenting with peptides than most humans on the planet.
Well, you definitely had the jump start on it. So I'm looking forward to some of the new questions to ask because, yes, they are exploding online from TikTok biohackers, and
Yeah.
these forums with anti-aging clinic. But, a lot of people think that they could just order them from research sites. Man, could you answer what the hell is going on out there and fix, they
Yeah.
think they can fix their health. I hear it all the time at the office.
Yeah, well, and we see that too, where clients will say, "Hey, I found a place where I can get my peptides," and we're like, "Okay, that's great. Where are you getting them?" And they're like, "Oh no, as a friend, and it's a really good source." And no, it's all tested and it's above water. And I'm like, "Okay, well, yeah, who's the pharmacist that's making the peptide?" What do you mean? There's no pharmacist, and so I mean the big red flag is if there's no pharmacist, then there's no regulation, there's no testing, and yeah, they're going to test it out of any manufacturing facility and send you the COA. Everyone thinks the COA is like, oh, it's authentic and it's clean, and you had one test on it, but that even if it's 99% pure, that does not mean that those amino acids are sequenced in the right way. You don't know the dosing. So if you're taking like a GLP-1, for example, you may have a bottle that's got twice the volume in it, and you're putting your body at enormous risk. And then when we've tested it at our 503A pharmacies, what we've seen is contamination, arsenic, cadmium, heavy metals, and then there's lipopolysaccharides, so there's risk of infections. And this is really why the FDA they're cracking down on a lot of these what are called RUO, or human not for human consumption peptide manufacturers, because they are putting a lot of people at risk. And the worst is people are expecting to get a certain result from peptides, and it's just not happening because it's not the right molecule, and that structure is degraded before it can ever reach the site of the cell. I mean, you take something like tesamorelin. Tesamorelin does have FDA approval, but it's a very popular growth hormone releasing peptide. But what a lot of the gym bros or whoever taking it from research use only, they don't realize there's a fatty acid on the end cap, because it's a very long amino acid chain. It's 44 amino acids, and if you don't have it properly structured by a pharmacist, then that peptide gets completely degraded before it even accesses that site where you want it to go. So, and we could go on and on about this, but Peptide Science is the largest distributor of these. You know, they closed down. They're getting cease and desist. And the problem with a lot of these companies, though, I mean, it's $1 billion industry in the United States. 80% of people using peptides are using research use only, and hopefully that will change. but these companies, they'll just have another business that they open up and another business. It's a Chinese knockoff product of peptides is all it is. It all comes from the same source.
Yeah, you brought something up really important, and that is how almost, I'd say 80 to 90%, 80% of the people that come into my office ask about peptides. They're all into the natural healing and they think that's the way to go, but they get them online and all they have to do is check that little box that says research for animals. And that has skirted any kind of valid approach to injecting these substances. It's absolutely fascinating. So, I how do you do things that differently than what goes on, online?
Yeah, well, we've always used a 503A. And when I was looking into peptides, I understand, you just have this itch, you want to try them. And so the first couple of months, this was over a decade ago, I was like, all right, I'm going to just order some of these from this site where I could and just say I'm a researcher because I am, but I'm the rat. And, and, and then I started noticing this is not smart because I have I want to live to be 222. It's like, why would I take a risk on something from that's not for human consumption that I'm injecting into my body? It made no sense. So I actually spent an enormous amount of money to get the pharmacist. I found a pharmacist who loved peptides. That was his PhD, was in researching peptides, and so he knew how to structure them, and he knew the covalent bonding worked, how to use the acetylation, and so I bought all the API. I just said, okay, we'll invest a bunch of money, and can you compound the peptides with 503A? And he's like, yes, absolutely. And so that's how it all started. And we've always used 503A, 503B compounding pharmacies. And it is not easy. The regulations, because Big Pharma does not like compounding pharmacies. I mean, it's the only competition. I mean, they have a monopoly anyways, but it's
Yeah.
that one competition that they want to obliterate. I mean, anyone that's taking a drop of their profits, they want to take them out. But in the medical establishment, 503A compounding pharmacy is the oldest form of medicine, of allopathic medicine, because you can have this customized drug made in a compounding pharmacy that's not mass distribution like Big Pharma wants. So yeah, it's very unique, but we've always used these licensed 503A pharmacies and vet them out, make sure they're the best of the best.
What is a 503A? What does that mean? Is that just a certification or what is that?
It's a very particular designation that means 503A pharmacies can take prescriptions in from doctors or prescribing providers and send it directly to a patient. So it's compounded in a personalized way. A 503B is they make more of the bulk substances for a lot of the 503A pharmacies when there's shortages.
Hmm. So, can you explain how actually some of the more popular peptides, how do they communicate um, with the signal and signal the cells to repair or grow or regulate? I think the some of the audience needs to really get a deep dive into understanding how healing, aging, and performance really works.
I think the coolest thing about peptides is they naturally exist in your body, and that's what researchers have been looking at. You take one of the most popular peptides, BPC 157, your body protective compound. This is made naturally by your gastric secretion. So if you think of your stomach, it's a hostile environment for almost anything. It's like a brick oven. You want to heat it up so you can denature your proteins when you eat. And so, but it also peptides are very fragile molecules. I mean, you don't want to expose them to a lot of hydrochloric acid. But what researchers discovered out of Zagreb University in Croatia, this was 40, almost 50 years ago now, they discovered that there's this peptide that protects the lining of the stomach from the acids. And as they wondered, why doesn't this acid just completely, ruin all the tissue structures in the body. And they found that it was BPC 157 that's there as that protective agent. And BPC, every cell in your body has a receptor for BPC. And they started looking at it. They're looking for like a panacea. They said, well, if this is protecting and that's why they call it the body protecting compound. So it's a leverage point. It's like the master key that unlocks all the genes. And so when they started looking elsewhere, they found, okay, it actually improves fibroblasts. And so you get this fibroblastic growth factor that helps with tendons. So anyone who wants to build muscle, your limiting factor is when the tendons start getting inflamed, and it's hard to build muscle when you've got tendonitis. And they found that, okay, well, you need fibroblasts, and that's where BPC just shines. It promotes VEGF, so this vascular endothelial growth factor. It turns on the receptors for growth hormones. So if you're using BPC, you stack I mentioned testosterone earlier. You stack those, and now you have this compounding benefit of having more growth hormone expression, and that's going to help you heal. It's a dopamine modulator, so it works on the brain. It's this neurotransmitter. It's a refuel for the dopamine. But we all have this like dopamine deficiency because we're on our phones. BPC seems to help with that. I mean, it helps with nitric oxide. And anytime you have nitric oxide, you're going to have more mitochondrial biogenesis. So you're going to turn on energy pathways. So that's just one little example of how, these peptides, they tune up the signaling, but it's not like a small molecule drug where you're suppressing one system in your body and you're pulling nutrients. Like you use a statin, for example. Now your liver is not going to make as much cholesterol, but it's pulling CoQ10, which is the very thing our hearts need. It protects the mitochondria in your heart. The cardiac cells have almost more mitochondria than any other system in your body. And yet we're starving it out from CoQ10 just to suppress the cholesterol production instead of asking, why is cholesterol high in the first place?
I love that he is bringing this up, man, because I hear about this all day long. Okay, quick question. BPC 157 is an injectable, I guess, for the most part, but I understand that it can also be a capsule that you can ingest, which makes it maybe more bioavailable because it is digested in the stomach. Can you just kind of comment on the difference?
Yeah, because BPC, if you have an injury, you're probably you're going to get some benefits oral, but you'd be better off just using it as an injectable. And just so everyone knows, it's not FDA approved. It was put on the Category 2 list at the end of the Biden administration. RFK is trying to change that, and he's been very public about the fact that the FDA, they did that illegally, moving these substances down. But and a lot of people, there's a lot of criticism that there's not a lot of human studies on BPC, but there's a lot of clinical data. Clinicians, there's millions of prescriptions that have gone out every year for the last almost decade. So we do have that, and there are some European studies on humans. There's actually there's a study on bladder pain in women, for example. They found it was very helpful for that. So there are some interesting studies. We're actually starting what are called IRBs, and IRBs is like a pre-study before you apply for an IND, an investigational new drug. And so we're working with some PhDs right now on that. But BPC 157, if you take it orally, a lot of these, research use only pharmacies, or, someone just kind of working in their, in their own warehouse, they put it in the wrong material. So if you put it in the wrong capsule, the enzymes in some of the capsules can already cause these peptides to degrade. And so you may not be even getting any kind of benefit from it. But when it hits the stomach, because BPC 157 is already there, it actually and the way that our pharmacist makes it is there's enzymes that you want in that peptide structure, so that when the peptide hits the stomach acids, now you've got enzymes that turn on the activation of the peptide, and then those enzymes open up the gap junctions in the gut so that it can bind to the right receptors and then get transported into the blood. So if you have the right kind, and very few pharmacies actually know how to do this. They just think, oh, I can put peptides into a capsule just like anything else. And it will be fine, but it's not. You've got to have the right enzymes, the end caps. One thing you can do is you can tie the end caps together so that you get a better expression cellularly.
So injecting BPC 157 does make it more bioavailable to obviously all the receptors, even in the gut and so on, right?
It does, but you can take it orally and you'll get about 80% of absorption if done properly.
If it's done properly. Could you also, I love that you're talking about the research and, you know, you hear so much about, social media's gone crazy about it, but can you clear the air about TB500, GLP-1s, and the research that, whatever strong evidence that is out there, or is it overhyped? Yeah,
No, well, TB500 is a fragment. It's 15 amino acids of the larger what's called thymosin beta 4, and that's 43 amino acids. And so what the researchers found is that there's these 15 fragments, and that's TB500, and that's the most active part of it. But if you're looking for immune modulation, we found thymosin beta 4 is just a little stronger, and actually it was discovered in the 60s, and then they really did a lot of research out of the Albert Einstein School of Medicine, and TB500 does have plenty of human clinical trials. I know a lot of people they just take it at face value, like, oh, there's no data, but it's made by your thymus gland. It's very well documented as far as what it does with cell migration. So if you think you and I get an injury, and now our body has to repair itself, well, thymosin beta 4, it predates anything else that's going on in your body to mobilize like your stem cells into the area to help you recover. And it's a really beautiful molecule. It also, macrophages are like, they're kind of like they go in there and beat things up. That's like it's like the brute police force that show up and say, okay, we're evicting you, get out now. And so, but there's macrophage 1 and there's these M2 macrophages. And if you get stuck in this kind of chronic inflammatory response, your macrophages are always there beating your body up. And you want to shift it over to the M2 where now it's just police surveillance. And that's what thymosin beta 4 does, is it just creates this environment where you can pull your body out of these chronic inflammatory states. In one of the studies, they looked at mice. First, they did it on mice who had, they induced cardiovascular events, myocardial infarction. And they looked at the tissue. They had the placebo group, and then they had the thymosin beta 4 group, and they looked at the cardiac tissue, and the tissue becomes really fibrotic and rigid when you've had a heart attack or any kind of cardiovascular event. And they found that the mice that had the thymosin beta 4, their cardiac tissue had not near the rigidity of the other mice. And now you'll see in human studies, they've actually found that it can help reverse a lot of that ischemic damage from myocardial infarctions. And these studies, it goes way back, and I'm not really sure why no one's brought it to market, because the evidence is overwhelming. I mean, it's angiogenic, so you get new vascularity in areas. It regulates that Th1, Th2 response. In some cases, it can revitalize stem cells in the hair. So
Oh,
otherwise, it's not really that important. I mean, but yeah, it's such a good
I'm going
peptide.
on. Yeah.
It's such a
Let me
good
let me
peptide.
let me ask you though, because there is some confusion. Yes, RFK Jr. wants to move from 12 or so of these 17 that are on the Category 2 list into the Category 1 list to make it more.
Yeah, 14 of the 19 is what he's
14, is it?
talking about.
Yeah. So, but if there's that kind of research out there, why is it so sluggish to move all those, several of those popular ones onto Category 1? And how did GLP-1 become, you know, by the way, for the audience that doesn't know, GLP-1 is not a drug, but it's a peptide. But some people think of it, because you can get it by prescription, that it's a drug, or you have to get it by prescription for a doctor. Can you
Yeah,
go over
well,
some of that?
yeah, and if I'm getting too nuanced, you guys just cut me off and we can have more fun. But this is like, if you just look at what is classified as a drug, if the three of us were on here and Terry's like, hey, an orange cures cancer, right? And I've got, it's curing cancer, then the FDA is going to say, okay, cool. Have you ran it through the 3 phases of clinical trials? And first of all, you got to establish safety. And then second, you have to establish efficacy, and that's phase 2. And then phase 3 is where, okay, now we need to know that it's safer and more effective than any other drugs on the market. And so we'd have to have a condition, and Dr. Terry would be like, all right, oranges treat cancer. And so here's what we're going to do. And then an orange would literally be a drug. And so, you could classify anything as a drug if you're treating a particular condition. And so with peptides, this is where like the GLP-1s, they are a peptide that naturally occurs in your body. And liraglutide was one of the first GLP-1s ever made. And it was, it's been around for about 20 years and it had a lot of side effects. And then they just kept kind of iterating, and they found that semaglutide was a little better. And then we all know Ozempic. But the way pharmaceutical companies can get a patent on something natural is it's the administration of it. So Terry would say, well, with this orange, you have to eat the pills and you have to boil it in water. And then there's a whole distillation that you want to do, and you want to put pressure on it. And that would be the administration of the orange, because no one can patent something that already exists in nature, but you can patent the administration. That's what they did with Ozempic. They said, here's our clinical trials, and no one else can copy it. So even the 503A compounding pharmacies that are producing semaglutide, and they're doing it the same dose and same recommendations as Ozempic, for example, they're getting sued. And because they're violating the patent that Eli Lilly has. And so it's been or Novo Nordisk or whoever is making these. And so that's kind of the thing that's not happened with thymosin beta 4. It's not gone through the clinical trials for specific conditions. They've just said, okay, and that's when we're starting an IRB. If we wanted to take it to an IND, then we have to mobilize 100 $50 to $100 million just to get it down that pathway for drug manufacturing. And in order to do that, you've got to have shareholders. There's got to be some financial gains at the end. And it's really hard to patent something natural like thymosin beta 4 because people already know about it. BPC 157. It's like, how are we going to enforce all these patent violations? Even retatrutide, which is the big triple agonist. This retatrutide is, by the way,
Yeah.
it's the biggest medical breakthrough of our lifetime. I mean, it's amazing. And I think there'll be bigger ones every year in the near future. But even retatrutide, Eli Lilly, is the reason why it's not on the market. And I could be speculating. I don't work for Eli Lilly, but they're trying to get as many indications to turn this into a drug that treats osteoarthritic knees. Their Triumph 4 studies, 76% of people using it had a significant reduction in osteoarthritic knees. Sleep apnea, obviously weight loss. You can lose almost 30% of your total body fat. And that was another finding in phase 3. So obesity, diabetes, they're even considering it for like fatty liver disease. So it's actually, but they want to get as many indications as they can so that they can sue anyone who's compounding it or anyone who's marketing it, because that's theirs. So I get it. They put the money into it. They're the ones that landed on using this triple agonist, but that's that. Hopefully that gives people a little better perspective on what natural medicine is up against when it comes to the FDA and then big pharma.
Regan, I just wanted to ask you about that you had mentioned there are so many iterations of the GLP-1s, and then the most recent one being retatrutide. I was going to ask you about that because I've been hearing about that people
Yeah.
are getting it online and so on. But from what I understand, that retatrutide, different from the other ones, it allows you to retain muscle or provides. As a matter of fact, I read a New York Times article that talked about this hormone called ostarine that
Yeah.
is in retatrutide. Is that true? I mean, is that what helps retain muscle? Or
No, I mean, you can stack it with Austrian or nandrolone. I mean, those are, for like osteoporosis, like nandrolone is another, some of the, bodybuilders use it as a performance enhancing drug. I've never seen retatrutide compounded it with it. So if you could send me the data, that'd be interesting. But retatrutide is a GLP-1, but the GLP-1 is where you get the most side effects because it delays gastric emptying. So we feel full longer. And it's about 8 times weaker than like the GLP-1 in semaglutide. So it's just a tiny pulse. So you maintain your appetite, which a lot of people, they're like, I'm still hungry on this. But your appetite is a good thing, folks. Like, you want to be hungry. Like, I get it,
Right.
not all the time. Just turn off the food noise, but eat some damn good food, and then you don't have to worry about it. And that's where most people lose muscle, because they're on such a high dose. Because in the
Yes.
trials, at the highest dose is where people have the most dramatic weight loss, but that's also where they have the most dramatic side effects. And doctors are trying to escalate patients up onto the highest dose as quickly as possible. It's more money for the big pharma, but the second peptide in retatrutide is called it's a GIP. And the GIP is an incretin molecule, and it helps stabilize the insulin resistance. So it gets insulin into the cell. And so semaglutide is just GLP-1. There's a little bit of insulin regulation, but not nearly as robust as tirzepatide, which is, a dual agonist. And so you get that GIP, and now it's like, okay, now we're getting better results, fewer side effects, we're on to something. And then the third peptide was glucagon. And glucagon is the one that you mentioned. It actually increases your blood sugar. And so it's there because your liver is more responsible for regulating your blood sugar between meals and when you're sleeping than your pancreas is. And so that glucagon, what it does is it turns on PGC1 alpha, so you get more mitochondrial biogenesis. So now the engine's turned on. And when you turn on the engine, now you're going to burn more energy even when you're not moving. And that's what they found, is it protects the lean muscle mass.
were you starting? I think you almost started to ease into the microdosing aspect now for the GLP-1s as more of a benefit than the big bolus of doing it at a high level, being
Yeah.
more of
Well,
an advantage.
and this is where the 503A compounding pharmacies have been great, because most people do not need that mega dose. And like our clinic, Ageless Future, like we don't. I mean, we don't treat disease. We help healthy people get healthier. That's what we do. And so now our providers, our doctors, are able to write prescriptions as a microdose, or a dose that's below what would be considered therapeutic in the clinical studies. And we've actually had doctors from other places like write us letters and like, you're underdosing your patient. And I'm like, well, yeah, they've lost 20 pounds and they've got, like, look at their 6-pack and they feel great. Like, this is medicine, it's personalized. And some people just don't get that. So the microdose, and some people would mistakenly say that microdosing is where you do small amounts, 2 times a week or 3 times a week. Don't do that. The GLP-1s have a half-life of 144 hours. So that's roughly 6.5 days. So if you're doing these microdosing, you're just confusing your physiology. But a microdose would be something that's lower than the lowest dose in the clinical trials.
Hey, Doc, to make it even simpler for the lay people and stupid people like me, I hear I hear all the time people coming in and they're going, have you seen all these celebrities on Ozempic and they look gaunt, they look terrible, they've lost so much weight, so you're touching on it, but for the lay people, what do they need to pay attention to? Because I guess since it's natural, I guess there's some
mirror.
good things. Yeah. Well, yeah. But I guess there's some good things that they can come out of it. But if they want to lose weight but don't want to look gaunt, and then they hear, well, once you lost it, you'll never get it back, and they look terrible, blah blah blah, and you see all these celebrities over and over and over. What's some strategies for the layperson who doesn't know what's going on? We don't want them ordering stuff on Amazon. We don't want them to go
Okay.
to the doctor, go, I need Ozempic. What's some strategies that you can put in a layperson's head who doesn't understand chemistry of how to handle the proper way to use a GLP-1?
Yeah. Well, the proper way is finding someone who understands health holistically. So they're not just looking at, let's get your weight off at all costs. I mean, weight is just one number, and so it does. Where you want to start, get your blood labs ran, because then in your blood labs you can see if maybe you're not breaking down proteins. We talked about the stomach earlier, and so you want to make sure that you've got lifestyle and habits that are going to support the weight loss, because when your body lets go of weight, it's really hard on your liver, on your kidneys, to get rid of all those toxins that your body's releasing. So you want to make sure that, okay, are they going to put you on a detoxification plan? Is there health coaching so that you make sure you're getting your macros, you're getting roughly 1 gram of protein per pound of ideal body weight? I mean, that's a lot of protein. And when you don't have an appetite, then it's like, okay, we need to titrate this dose down even lower until you can start hitting your protein targets. So it's like, instead of having the goal be, let's get the weight down, the goal needs to be, let's optimize your health. And then as you get healthier, your weight's going to come down. But I've seen too many people end up in much worse shape. I mean, sick for months, being on it, they have no energy. There's actually a study that they found that if you turn off GLP-1, like it is a pleasure pathway in the brain. You guys like eating. I love eating, right? It gives pleasure. But when you're muting that signal too much, people actually have a GLP-1 induced depression, and it's very well documented. But it all, the flip side of that is does help with addiction. And so I don't know very many celebrities, but I know a lot of them struggle with there's addictive profiles there. And the smoking cessation's amazing with the GLP-1s, and food. So I think the biggest thing is get your blood labs ran, and then it's not just using a single peptide. Like, we would never prescribe just a GLP-1. We'd always say, well, let's protect the gut because you're slowing down gastric emptying. Let's get you on like BPC 157. We want to build muscle, so let's bring in tesamorelin, or maybe a myostatin inhibitor like MOTC or ACE-031. I mean, there's things that you can do to really help increase the performance of this person. But peptides, we found it's like a band. It's really nice to listen to an acoustic guitar, but man, when you bring the drummer in, it's like, okay, now we're rocking. Now maybe you bring the cellist in, you got a lead singer. That's what peptide stacking does. It enhances the signaling of everything around it. Like I mentioned with BPC 157, it's activating the growth hormone receptors. So why not give your body a little more growth hormone if you're somebody who's over 40 and you have some robust longevity goals?
The first thing that I heard was you brought a cello in with a electric guitar. So,
I
you know,
just came to mind. I'm obviously not a musician. Hey, give me. I hope the analogy worked for everyone but Terry. Terry's like, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about.
No, I'm so simple-minded. I just, hey, so what I am hearing is that I want the people to listen is you have to have a strategy, and you can't just, oh, I need to lose weight. And I'm going to go to my doctor, give me a pill. If they're not doing blood work, if they're not watching things, if they're not looking at what you actually are needed, that's a huge issue. So you don't want to be your Amazon doctor, your Google doctor. You want to actually have people that understand what they're going on. And a question I had when I heard when I was talking about you coming on the show was, I have people, and I've had 3 of them talk about Hashimoto's disease and RA, and using peptides for handling these conditions. And I'm like, are we talking symptom management? Are we talking immune modulation? Are we talking something deeper? What's your thoughts on those conditions?
Yeah, well, you may remember last time we talked, I got out of the conventional medical route and went to Chinese medical school, and that's where I got exposure to Eastern medicine, holistic healing. I also did an internship at the Northern Hawaii Community Hospital, so I got a really good understanding of Western medicine. And but Hashimoto's was the thing that got me there. So if you're using peptides for these, first thing is, what's the cause? And Hashimoto's, we found there's 4 triggers. We call them the epic triggers. So there's an emotional part of it that can be a big component of that autoimmune condition. You can have PTSD that can just dysregulate your immune system. The second one is if there's chronic pain. And the body ages much faster when there's chronic pain, which is why Crackin Backs Podcast, you guys help get people out of pain. And what you may or may not realize is you're making their brains younger just by doing that, and their whole body younger. So brilliant. And then the third one are infections. And that's the biggest one that I see is infections and chemicals. So with Hashimoto's, there's a good peptide called LL37 that can help eradicate infections. It's gentle. We call it the silent assassin. The compassionate assassin is actually, I have these peptide cards, and I have like these kind of avatars on it. And it's got the samurai, and it's like the compassionate assassin, because the LL37, it knows what is foreign to your body that's going to hurt your body, but it doesn't target any other bacteria. So like an antibiotic is like, it just crushes everything. And LL37 is brilliant. It's an antimicrobial peptide known as a cathelicidin, but it regenerates the tissue as it's eradicating viruses or fungal infections or bacterial infections. And so that can be a critical component of thymosin alpha-1. The second thing that we found is if you can stack an immune modulator like thymosin beta-4, we talked about that earlier, and then thymosin alpha-1. Thymosin alpha-1 is approved in over 30 countries for autoimmunity. They use it as an immune protectant in chemotherapy. It's a vaccine adjunct, so can actually help vaccines have fewer side effects and be more targeted to the immune system. So thymosin alpha-1 would be great. And then most people with Hashimoto's, probably like everyone has some kind of leaky gut. And that's where like BPC 157, KPV, the other peptide that is really helpful at downregulating systemic inflammation of the gut is called lorazepatide. And lorazepatide was, it's a peptide that was approved for celiac patients because, a lot of times with celiacs, you go wash your hands and there's gluten in the soap. You wash you put shampoo in your hair because gluten gives everything that texture. And then they end up in the bathroom all day. But if they have lorazepatide, then they can have these minor exposures to gluten and it doesn't upset their gut. But even if you don't have celiacs, lorazepatide is very protective for the gut lining.
Fascinating.
Brilliant. Brilliant.
You're talking about stacking. You just mentioned that word, and that just means adding on to, right? And then before the show, Spencer brought up in California, especially with the young adults, they're having these peptide parties. And it's like all these young guys are trying to get all pumped up and they're taking these peptide parties. Can you talk to us about the dangers of that and how stacking multiples every day can be dangerous, and what do people get in trouble with this dosing thing, and what to avoid in these stacking parties or whatever?
Yeah, and you mentioned a rave, Spencer.
Yeah.
So that's like a big, I don't know what they're doing, but oxytocin hopefully is part of it.
I'll send you the article that came out. It's whacked.
Yeah,
that's great because here's the truth. I think I was the first person to host a peptide party. And so we have these longevity retreats. And so we'll have nasal sprays and like some oral sprays. So it's just basic. We're not doing injections or anything at a therapeutic level, just enough so people can experience what it's like to use some of these peptides as an educational tool. And what you're referring to is some people who get very aggressive, just thinking that more is better. It sounds like they're very American, which I love, but with peptides, there's going to be a diminishing return because you can stack peptides together, but a lot of times when clients come in and we look at their protocol, we're like, well, who put you on this protocol? And they're like, well, I chat GPT or whatever, it's, I'm just following some influencers stack, like what they're doing. and they're working on the same pathway. And so when you have like two peptides working on the same pathway, and especially like if you're using growth hormone releasing peptides like IGF-1, LR3, CJC, 1295, sermorelin, testosterone, and you're using those together, well, the first thing is it's a lot of money that you're injecting into your body, and you can only pulse growth hormones so much. And you want to have this nice pulsatile range where you pulse it and then it calms down, pulse it and it calms down, because it's a feedback loop. And so if you're oversaturating your receptors, then you're not going to get the same benefits the next time you do it. And this is where you want to cycle peptides. So you can stack peptides together as long as you're working on different pathways and it's congruent with what you need in your labs. Otherwise, you're just kind of wasting money. But the danger comes when I see clients doing like IGF-1, LR3, and that one is not nearly as pulsatile. So you got to be careful when you use it, because it can cause a disruption in your blood sugar. So,
Very
so
nice.
I think this is for the most part, there's very, very low risk, but outside of having a very expensive stack that is getting you nowhere fast.
But the danger could be where you're getting them from, right?
That's
If
the
they're getting
real,
these,
yeah,
yeah.
because
So if you're getting
these
these waves from China, that could be your dangerous stuff, right?
I think you're on. I think that would probably be your biggest risk. And whether you're using a small amount or large amount, these endotoxins, they compound over time. So, we had a client a couple of weeks ago, and he reached out to us and he said, "Oh, I'm getting all these like nodules on my skin from CJC, and I'm starting to notice that I'm getting like eczema." And, I looked up his name. I'm like, I don't see in our system I don't think we were working together. He's like, oh no, my friend said that you're the guy to talk to and your team. And, as we looked up, he said, no, it's not a research use only peptide. It's from a great source. And then I had him send me a picture, and then I showed him right on their website, this tiny, tiny font. Like I almost had to have a magnifying glass to read it. It was like 3, the font size, and not for research use only. And so, but he'd been using it for months, but it was the endotoxin that can build up and accumulate. So you could imagine, Terry, at these parties, they're just loading their body. And so it's only a matter of time before the system breaks.
Really good information, because I'm hearing things like that too. How about sometimes I hear about itching at the injection site, redness, like a histamine type of reaction. Oftentimes, like with GHKCU or something. What's
Sure.
actually happening with that? And is there a way to? I mean, the itching is uncomfortable for a short period of time, but what's actually going on? Is that a negative thing? Is that just what happens?
Well, with the peptides, there's a specific buffering agent that can change the pH, and GHK copper has a little more acidity, and so it does trigger a little more of that like histamine response. Um, it's not dangerous, but if you're getting it on a regular basis, then you may be either pushing the peptide in too fast, or you've got the wrong angle on the needle, or you need to give yourself a break on the peptides, or it's just run your blood labs and you can see if your eosinophils are really high, for example, you're just going to have an overactive histamine response. And so get on an antihistamine diet. KPV is a really great peptide that helps kind of solve that problem for, clients of ours who've had they have a very sensitive immune system. KPV can be really helpful. But if you are getting those nodules on a regular basis from a variety of peptides, you really want to work on your immune system first, because you could put yourself in anaphylaxis. And so make sure if anyone's using peptides, just have some Benadryl just in case, just some kind of antihistamine in case your body does have a reaction to it.
All right. So now we're in the baby boomer era here that wants to live longer. 45 and 60-year-olds, want all that longevity and so on. But do they really? I mean, you know, would you say that peptides is
Do they
the
really?
new way?
Is it how? Are you just asking like how crappy is their life? I mean, is that?
So the guy wants to live 220 years. Yeah. Yeah. Right.
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 Well, and it's
Yeah.
like that quote, everyone wants to go to heaven, but no one wants to die.
That's perfect. Now, peptides what do you see maybe in the next 10 years? Do you honest, man, do you see peptides being this new fad, or is this something that you see is going to be implemented as part of a future to foundational health?
When we started getting into these, I created this peptide course in 2019 for doctors, and I was like, because I'd trained my team, and I was like, then I had so many people reaching out. I'm like, okay, here's how you can learn it. Just get on my course. And then we'd have live events as well. And I thought peptides would be as big as they are today in like a matter of 2 or 3 years. I said, I can't believe that people aren't using these more because, I'd been practicing about 15, 16 years at the time. And I just saw the difference in the progress that my clients were making. I mean, these really challenging conditions to treat, suddenly people are just getting enormously better. And then we started to see, metabolically when the GLP-1s came out, like roughly 21, we just saw this just took out the guesswork. It's like, let's just mute the signaling in the brain. And then people lost weight, and it was very simple. It made our job 10 times easier. But I think peptides, we have just scratched the surface. So I'm at a group called Da Vinci 50. I'm on the medical advisory board, and so I get a front row seat to all of the new medical innovations, and these are not just speculative therapies. These are where there's humans having work done, and so a lot of them are outside of the country. And I can tell you, stem cell therapy and peptide therapy is in its infancy. And peptides, especially because we've sequenced still maybe 10% of some of these beautiful active peptides in the body, and we still like even the addition. If you take GLP-1, we'll take retatrutide for example, and they had studied extensively. Well, what if we just give someone glucagon? Is that going to help them lose weight? And it was really hard on the liver, hard on the body. It didn't work well in isolation. What about GIP? That incretin molecule that helps with insulin sensitivity. Same thing. People did not lose weight. It was very hard on the body. GLP-1, you can use it alone, but when you stack them together, now you've got the electric guitar and the cello, which doesn't go very well, but it does go well. But yeah, so I think just the ability where we have, and that's one reason why we're starting our own just kind of scientific advisory board, and we'll be announcing, kind of our results, is because, it's what are the right combinations? And we actually were awarded a patent called the peptide pathway bypass this year. And so I was able to prove with certainty that we can find out what's going on in your labs, what genes are not expressed, and what peptides can actually make the strongest changes in your labs. And so we've got that technology, and so we're going to be applying it in these clinical studies. And then you have pharmacists, and our pharmacist is brilliant. Like, he's got so many ideas of things he wants to stack together, and then there's all these peptides that are still like out there in kind of the ethers, where they haven't really made it through a whole lot of these animal models. But with AI, I think we're going to just be able to fast flow that and start understanding how these cool proteins really work.
Terry, you got any more questions for our expert testimony?
I'm still trying to process. I'm still trying to process question number 1. So yeah, we're good.
Okay.
Regan,
well, here's the big breakthrough that we'll see is in the mitochondrial side. And so that's where I would say, look for that first, because, we got Sloop 332 coming out. We've got SS31 that got FDA approved last year for Barth syndrome. So this mitochondrial deficiency, and the FDA fast flowed it because there's no other treatment. And these kids now have a life because of SS31. It's 4 amino acid chains. It's like tiny. And then you look at humanin, they're testing it for Alzheimer's, mitochondrial imbalance, MOTS-C, exercise mimetics. So I think that's where the biggest breakthroughs will be, is in mitochondria.
All right. I actually do have one more question.
There it is.
There it is. See, it took a while for my processing to happen. All right. So,
Need some mozzie, bro.
oh, I need more than that. So, we are you're our guy. We love you, and you're the only guy that that I refer to. But when it comes to somebody listening to the show, whether they're anywhere else, and they want to do this the right way, and let's say they're a chiropractor or a PT or somebody, how do they? What can they look for in their town to try and help their patients? What? So you mentioned trying to find a compounding pharmacy that knows this and doing blood work. What would the other person, taking yourself out of the equation, what do they need to do to make their patients happy, healthy?
Man, well, they can reach out. We have a telemedicine platform if they want to get into peptides, and they want to have a prescribing physician or nurse practitioner who's licensed in their state to collaborate with them. Then they can just reach out, and I'll get them connected with a telemedicine platform that is licensed in all 50 states. They work directly with the our approved pharmacies, and that would be easy for them to get rocking with it.
Reagan, if you remember from our first interview, this is the time that we do the rapid fire questions, and we got 5 of them. You're quick on your feet. I'm sure you're loaded with the good peptides that'll get you to answer
We'll find
concisely
out.
and quickly.
Yeah.
If you're ready for question number 1, you good? All right,
Good.
man. Reagan, if peptides truly represent the next frontier of precision medicine, what is one message you want people to remember so they don't get lost in the hype, especially with all these social media mavens out there?
Well, precision depends on the environment, so you always have to take care of your health.
Question. Okay. Question number 2. You are one of the few guys that talks about acupuncture and epitalon in the same sentence. If you had to choose one for the next 20 years, ancient medicine or modern peptide science, which one wins?
Well, is it just epitalon or is it all the peptides?
Ooh. Well, let's do epitalon and then comment on all the peptides.
Yeah, I'll take acupuncture, especially if I had like a really gifted acupuncturist that I could just take around with me the rest of my life. Like, absolutely.
All right. All
But
right.
if I had to give up all the peptides, I would just say,
Eesh.
sorry, I'm going to leave acupuncture behind.
Beautiful.
There you
I
go.
agree. All right. Question number 3. What's the one health habit you know you should do every day, but still occasionally skip like the rest of us might do?
Well, I'll tell you one that I do and I don't skip, which is I love like bakeries, and I live in a town where there's all these like European bakeries coming. So maybe once or twice a week I end up with a croissant in my hand, but don't tell anybody.
Man, I
Uh,
love croissants. Oh my
oh
gosh,
yeah.
they're great.
Oh my God.
So good.
Right? Question number 4. If someone spent one day following you around from morning to night, what's something about the way you live that would surprise people who only know you as the peptide expert?
Boy, they'd probably be surprised at the amount of physical activity I have, maybe, or they probably would realize I'm not as serious as a lot of people think I am. Is what I've heard more often than not. They just feel like I'm just like this surfer bum from California or something like that. So that's probably one of the things.
Love it, man. All right, last question, buddy. Imagine you're 95 years old, sitting on a porch, obviously in a rocking chair, somewhere in the mountains, looking back at your life. What would have mattered more to you in the end? The science you discovered or the lives you changed along the way?
I think it would be the lives I changed along the way because of the science I was really interested in. And I like taking discoveries and helping apply those discoveries in people's life because I know it's going to help them. So it's always about how many people had a health transformation because of the work I'm doing, and that would be kind of my test of a good life.
That's great. And that is so true for all of us. Thanks, Reagan. You've been extra special, man. You answered more of the questions that I even had for you. It was great having you on again.
My
And
pleasure.
actually,
So good to be
y-
back.
yeah, I imagine we're going to have him on again, and then
Ugh.
because the science is just evolving. Terry, you got any questions left for Reagan or?
No, the only question I have is when can you come back?
Yeah, yeah.
I'll bring
So-
my pharmacist next time. He can answer
I
all
would
these
love to.
nuances. If you want to get in the weeds, let me know. I
Yeah.
can set it up.
I love that. Let's do
Absolutely.
that, and we're gonna keep in touch. And I just can't thank you enough for all your wisdom and just coming on the show. Your wisdom is trying to help other people, and that's so obvious. So thank you for being you.
You got it. Thanks, you guys.
Take care, bud.